Hey guys, tonight we're not stepping into the mind of a philosopher. We're stepping onto a battlefield, but not the kind with choreographed joust, slow-motion horse charges or conveniently clean armour. No, tonight we dive into the real thing. Mud, confusion, panic, sweat, and steel. This is what actually happened in a medieval battle, and spoiler alert, it looked nothing like the movies. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken to the sound of something between a horn and a man screaming the word march, like it owes him money. There is no snooze button, there is no mattress, there is only the damp cold earth and the deep spiritual ache of having slept in your armour. You try to stretch, but immediately regret it. Your chainmail has become one with your body like a clingy X. Around you, a dozen other soldiers are waking up, each with the same look of regret and trench foot. One guy is still asleep, with his head on a helmet full of rainwater. Another is trying to pull a slug out of his boot with a dagger. You're not sure if you should eat breakfast or apologise to your organs in advance. Breakfast, by the way, is what we'd call a historically significant disappointment. It's a crust of bread so hard it could deflect arrows, possibly made last Lent. You chew slowly, not because you're savouring it, but because your jaw is still sore from yesterday's feast, which included meat of questionable origin and something that may have once been a vegetable. You wash it down with warm ale because medieval water was a game of bacterial roulette. There's no time for grooming. Not that it matters. You haven't seen your own face in weeks, and frankly that's for the best. You splash a handful of swamp water on your cheeks for the illusion of hygiene, then strap on gear that smells like it's been fermenting in fear. Then come the orders. Form up, move out, yelled by someone on a horse who clearly hasn't walked a mile in his life. The army stirs, men grumble, armour clanks, and someone is already limping from stepping on a pointy rock while barefoot. The mud sucks at your boots like it's trying to claim your soul. You haven't even made contact with the enemy yet, and you're already exhausted, damp, hungry, and vaguely regretting your entire life. And you know what the worst part is? This is one of the good mornings. The command is given. March. And so you do. Not because you want to, but because the alternative is staying behind and getting accused of desertion, which usually ends with something being chopped off. So you trudge forward, one squelching, miserable footstep at a time. The ground is less earth and more moist despair. Mud is a given, but this is no ordinary mud. It's the kind that sucks at your boots like it's trying to steal your soul, or at least your left foot. You stop to adjust a strap and instantly fall behind, drawing glares from the man behind you, whose face says, "I will eat you if this slows me down again." Armour, it turns out, was not designed for hiking. It chafes, it pinches, and it rubs in places you didn't even know had skin. Your shoulders ache, your thighs burn, and your inner thighs are forming an alliance against you with every clanking step. You're essentially a walking iron sausage being slow roasted in your own sweat. The air smells like livestock, cheap onions, and fear. Someone ahead passes gas with the kind of force that suggests they lost a battle with last night's turnip stew. You try to breathe through your mouth, but immediately regret that decision too. You pass a dead hedgehog, a broken cart, and what might be a toe. No one stops. Stopping is for people who enjoy being yelled at. The sergeant yells anyway. He doesn't stop yelling. It's his entire personality now. Morale is non-existent. Some men sing war songs to cope. Others mutter prayers. One guy in the back just screams into the wind. No one stops him. Honestly, it helps. At one point you think, maybe the enemy will surrender before we get there. Then you remember they're probably thinking the same thing, which means this is going to end with someone panicking, everyone stabbing, and you trying to remember which end of the spear goes where. After hours, a hill appears. Of course it does. Every medieval battle takes place at the top of a stupid hill. As you begin the ascent, someone slips and rolls down. No one helps. They're better off now. And still, you march. Eventually you arrive at the place where you'll not sleep tonight. The battle camp. It's less a base of operations and more an organised outbreak. There are tents, sure, if you're nobility. The rest of you get a patch of mud, slightly less cursed than the rest. You stake your spot by collapsing on the ground and calling it a bed. Your neighbour does the same. Congratulations, you've started a trench community. The smell hits you next. A horrifying cocktail of wet wool, unwashed bodies, fermented boots, and whatever is rotting near the food cart. There's a buzz in the air, not excitement, just flies, thousands of them. Some of them have names now. You've made peace with that. Then there's the latrine, and by latrine we mean a shallow hole in the ground that was dug in haste and regret. Privacy? None. Smell? Biblical. You try not to look anyone in the eyes during your visit. Everyone's dignity has already fled. You're handed a bowl of stew. It's grey. That's the only flavour. Grey. You ask what's in it, and the cook makes eye contact for 5 uncomfortable seconds before walking away. You eat it anyway because you're starving, and you hope whatever meat is in there didn't have a name 2 hours ago. Some men are sharpening weapons, others are playing dice. A few are praying very loudly, not out of devotion, but make sure everyone sees that they're praying, just in case God's offering extra protection to the dramatic ones. Then there's the sounds. Hacking coughs, distant weeping, a man singing off-key about bread, and somewhere someone trying to play a lute like it's a weapon. You hear a knight bark an order. He's clean. He smells like lavender. You hate him instantly. Night falls. You curl up in your damp cloak, lying next to a guy who snores like he swallowed a donkey. You try to sleep, but your brain's too busy imagining all the ways you could die tomorrow or tonight if that goat kicks you in your ribs again. And as you finally start to doze, a voice yells from the distance, "Form up at sunrise." Fantastic. Another beautiful morning awaits. Dawn breaks, and with it comes the icy realization that you're going to die in a field, probably soon, possibly before lunch. You haven't even brushed your teeth. Not that you have a toothbrush or any teeth worth saving. Trumpets sound, men groan. You crawl out of your damp cocoon of lice-infested wool to find your comrades already pretending to be motivated. You line up because standing in rows makes people feel slightly more in control of impending doom. It's a lie, but it's one you can shuffle into with numb feet and questionable bowel control. And then he appears, the noble commander, a man wearing polished armour so clean it's practically glowing. He's got that energy only people who've never been punched in the face tend to have. He surveys the troops like a disappointed parent who just found out you joined the losing side in a tavern brawl. He clears his throat. Everyone braces. It begins. Men, today we fight for glory. Pause for effect. Someone near you coughs up something alive. For our king, our lands, our honour, the crowd murmurs. Mostly from stomach cramps, not patriotism. Look to your brothers. Look to your steel. You glance sideways. The man next to you is visibly shaking and has his helmet on backward. His steel is bent. The enemy fears us. They probably don't. They probably have their own guy yelling the same thing in another accent. If you die today, oh good, the cheerful bit. You die as heroes. You suppress the urge to raise your hand and ask, can I die later? Maybe as a baker. Then comes the bit about God. God is on your side, which is reassuring, except you're fairly sure God's been busy smiting everyone equally this season. The speech ends with a sword thrust to the sky and a mighty shout of "Forward!" No one moves. A few guys blink. One guy sneezes. The shouting continues until someone finally shuffles forward and the rest reluctantly follow. Not out of conviction, mind you. Mostly because standing still means the commander might single you out for a volunteer job, and you've heard what happened to the last volunteer. Thus ends the pep talk. You're now spiritually prepared to panic with a purpose. So now it's time to form ranks, a noble phrase conjuring images of precision, discipline, and strategy. What you actually get is a very confused clump of people vaguely facing the same direction, half of whom are still trying to put on their helmets. Some are holding weapons they just picked up 5 minutes ago. One guy is gripping a pitchfork. You're pretty sure he's just here by accident. Your sergeant, who was probably a pig farmer 3 years ago, starts barking numbers. No one knows what they mean, but everyone nods as if they understand. Front line shield wall. He screams. The second line pikes forward. You do as instructed, even though the guy in front of you has his shield upside down and is using it to itch his back. To your left is a guy with a spear twice his height, who keeps poking people unintentionally. To your right is a man humming a battle hymn that may or may not just be green sleeves with different lyrics. Directly behind you is someone breathing like he's been practicing dramatic dying noises in advance. You suspect he might not even be wounded, just ready. The cavalry is off to one side, horses pawing the ground dramatically, knights sitting tall and pristine in full plate armour that cost more than your entire village. They look majestic. You, meanwhile, are standing in borrowed boots and chainmail that smells like someone died in it. Probably because someone did. There's a sudden order to move forward and tighten the line. This is easier said than done when every second man is stepping on someone else's foot, and the mud is threatening to swallow small soldiers whole. Your feet slide and someone elbows you. Your shield is backwards now and you don't have the emotional energy to fix it. Then comes the drum beat, a slow, ominous thud that tells everyone it's about to start. Men start whispering prayers. One man starts quietly sobbing. You pretend not to notice, mostly because you're busy making your own peace with mortality. You take a deep breath, raise your weapon, and try not to pass out. This is it. You're ready. Well, as ready as anyone in a crooked line of terrified peasants can be. Just when the formation starts looking somewhat believable, meaning no one is actively walking in the wrong direction, the sky betrays you. It begins with a sound, a soft, distant whoosh that becomes a collective whisper of doom. Then the shouting starts. Shields up! You scramble to obey, though someone nearby is still trying to figure out which end of the shield is up. A moment later the sky darkens. Not with clouds, but with hundreds of tiny death sticks launched from the enemy's side with alarming enthusiasm, and then they fall. The arrows rain down with all the mercy of an angry god having a very bad day. The man 2 rows ahead of you drops instantly, an arrow sticking out of his shoulder like a forgotten quill. Someone screams, someone else curses in Latin. Or maybe he was just sneezing. It's hard to tell through the panic. Here's what the movies don't show. Arrows don't glide gracefully into targets like ballerinas with sharp toes. They thud, crack, stick, and occasionally bounce off armour before embedding themselves in things not meant to be pierced, like feet, thighs, and whatever counts as emotional stability. You try to shrink behind your shield, which suddenly feels far too small and alarmingly homemade. An arrow clatters off it with a metallic clang, and you immediately decide that this shield is now your best friend. You mentally name it Gerald. You whisper promises to Gerald that if you survive, you'll never talk badly about its lopsided shape again. To your left, someone is cursing the archers. To your right, someone is being cursed, mostly because he forgot to duck. Behind you, a man is yelling that he's hit, though you strongly suspect he's just trying to get out of what's coming next. Then the second volley comes. At this point, any illusion of calm has evaporated. Veterans crouch low and mumble mantras. New recruits cry openly. One guy just lies down and pretends to be dead. Not a terrible strategy, honestly. Eventually the sky clears. You're alive. Gerald did well. But now the real horror begins. Close combat. Which means it's time to get very sweaty, very loud, and probably stabbed. There's no countdown, no dramatic drum roll, and no theatrical charge like in the songs. One moment you're trembling in your half-formed line, and the next all hell breaks loose. It starts with a surge. Your side moves forward, not so much with courage as with the reluctant momentum of men who know they'll be trampled if they hesitate. Someone ahead of you yells something inspiring, promptly trips and gets stepped on. You don't stop to help, not because you're cruel, but because you're fairly certain you'll join him if you do. And then you hit literally, there's a collision. You slam into another human being like a sack of potatoes, colliding with a sack of potatoes wearing sharp objects. Forget fancy sword play. This is not a dance. This is a meat blender. You swing your weapon, maybe a sword, maybe an axe, maybe just a glorified kitchen tool. You don't aim. You don't have time. You flail. You hear metal crash against metal. Wood shatters. Men grunt. And someone nearby repeatedly yelling like it's a war chant. The fighting is close. Intimate, really. You're now deeply aware of the smell of the enemy. Sweat, fear, and onions. There is no such thing as personal space. There is only panic. At one point you stab downward and hope it wasn't your own foot. Your helmet fogs up. You can't see. You can't breathe. Someone's shoulder slams into your ribs, and you both stumble sideways, gasping. There's blood on your gauntlet, not yours probably, could be, doesn't matter. A man swings at your head. You duck out of reflex, he hits someone else. You exchange a brief glance. Half apology, half shrug. There's no time for blame, only surviving. You try to remember your training, but it mostly consisted of swing hard and don't die. So you keep swinging, occasionally hitting, mostly missing. Every now and then someone falls. Sometimes they scream, sometimes they go quiet instantly. You try not to look. This isn't a movie. This is a bar fight at the world's worst tavern with 500 angry men and no one to break it up. And it's just getting started. If you thought medieval battle would sound like the elegant clash of swords and heroic trumpets, you are breathtakingly mistaken. It sounds more like a livestock market colliding with a blacksmith shop during an earthquake. The first thing you notice is the screaming. It's constant. Not just from the wounded, though there are plenty of those, but from the living. Men yell to psych themselves up. They yell because they've been stabbed. They yell because someone stepped on their foot, or because they forgot whose side they're on, and are now swinging wildly at anything that moves, including a bush. You've got the shrill screams of young lads who should have stayed in the bakery, guttural bellows from big men with axes, and the high-pitched, borderline apologetic whimper of a guy realizing he's wearing the wrong team's colours. Somewhere behind the lines, someone's shouting, "Hold the line!" with all the hope of a man yelling at the tide to stop. No one listens. You can't even hear him. You're too busy dodging weapons and wondering if your left arm always made that clicking sound. Then come the weapons themselves. Swords clang against shields. Maces make a dull, horrifying thump when they connect with something soft, usually a face. Arrows whistle past your ears with the precise sound of regret. Occasionally a spear cracks through armour, and the resulting shriek makes your spine reconsider its commitment to standing upright. But the worst sound, it's not the screaming, it's not even the dying, it's the wet sounds. Yes, wet. The squelch of someone stepping in something that used to be a person. The slurp of blood and mud mixing beneath your boots. The squish when someone lands badly and doesn't get up. These aren't sounds you forget. They take up permanent residence in your nightmares. You also hear armour clanking, men crying for their mothers, and a horse screaming, which, by the way, is profoundly haunting, and somewhere unbelievably, someone trying to sing a hymn badly and out of tune. Amid it all, your ears start to ring. Not from injury, just overload. You start to operate on instinct because your brain's given up and gone on break. And still, the screaming continues. If you were hoping for a cinematic slow-motion end where you deliver a final monologue before dramatically collapsing, I regret to inform you that's not how this goes. Most people in a medieval battle died unseen, unheard, and from behind. Usually by a guy who didn't even know your name. Sometimes it was even someone on your own side. You see, the battlefield is not a polite arena. It's a sweaty, chaotic mosh pit, where everyone's one sneeze away from a fatal misunderstanding. 1 minute you're swinging your axe like you mean it. The next thunk. Something pierces your back and your knees betray you. You fall forward into the mud with the grace of a collapsing haystack. No one notices. No one has time. There are no final words. No hand to hold, just you, the dirt, and the very strong suspicion that this could have been avoided if you'd become a monk. Then there are those taken down by horses, not stabbed, not slashed, trampled. Nothing says ignoble death quite like becoming one with the soil beneath a panicked warrior named Buttercup. And let's not forget the friendly fire. Not the kind with explosives, but the kind where a poorly trained militiaman swings a flail in a wide, hopeful arc and accidentally removes your ear or your head. Either way, you're remembered as that guy who stood a bit too close to Jeff. Some fall and are simply left behind, whether unconscious, injured, or just deeply committed to pretending to be dead. They lie still while boots stomp past. Some of them live, some don't. It all depends on luck, mud, and whether a looter mistakes them for actual cargo. And sometimes it's insultingly random. A slipped foot on blood-soaked grass, a snapped ankle in a hole someone dug to poop in, or getting crushed under a panicked pile of men trying to flee but going in the same direction. In short, medieval death wasn't majestic. It was awkward, undignified, and almost always sudden. Which is why when a man survives, he's not celebrated for his bravery, but for his sheer dumb luck. Movies make them look majestic, galloping steeds ridden by chivalrous knights, charging boldly into battle like thunder-given legs. In reality, horses in medieval combat were less glory machines and more unpredictable battering rams with anxiety issues. When cavalry charges, you don't hear trumpets, you hear rumbling. Not the poetic kind, but the kind that makes your ribs vibrate and convinces your lower intestines it's time to evacuate. You glance up and see them, enormous war horses bearing down at speeds you didn't think possible from something that eats grass for a living. The knights look impressive from afar. Shimmering armour, fluttering banners, and fancy helmets that scream. I paid extra for this. But up close, it's just screaming from them, from the horses, and from you. Because here's the thing, horses do not care about your formations, they do not respect personal space, and they do not distinguish between enemy and guy just trying to stay alive. If you're in their way, you're going to get flattened into something archaeologists will one day label a regretful smear. One man gets run over entirely, disappears beneath hooves, and is never seen again. Another tries to grab a knight's leg, misses, and is kicked in the chest so hard he might now be legally classified as a belle. Some knights fall off, a surprising number actually. Turns out slippery mud and full plate armour don't mix. When they crash, the sound is somewhere between a pantry collapsing and a church bell being punched. They then lie there like confused beetles, flailing and cursing as they try to stand up before someone sticks them with something pointy. And don't think the horses are immune to chaos. One rears up dramatically, gets spooked by a flag and bolts in the wrong direction, dragging its rider toward the latrines. Another simply refuses to move at all, which results in a shouting match between knight and horse that everyone awkwardly ignores. For infantry, there's only one rule: don't be under the horse. It's a rule everyone learns quickly, often the hard way. By the end, horses are blooded, men are scattered, and whatever formation existed is now a tragic memory. And the cavalry, they'll probably do it all again tomorrow. At some point in the battle, after the arrows, after the screaming, after you've been accidentally elbowed by at least 3 people on your own side, you fall. It might be from a shove or tripping over a severed limb or slipping on the world's sickest combination of blood, bile, and someone's recently spilled breakfast. It doesn't matter how it happens, you're down. And in medieval battle, falling down is not part of the choreography, it's a decision point. You now have about 3 seconds to make a very important choice. Get up and maybe die, or stay down and maybe die. Getting up is bold, noble, and also incredibly dangerous because standing up in a battlefield means becoming a very obvious, very upright target in a sea of distractions. You might get speared just for trying. Worse, you might get trampled by your own side, who now view you as battlefield floor texture. On the other hand, staying down isn't exactly safe either. People fall on you, horses stomp near you, looters occasionally poke the bodies to see if they're dead or just trying really hard, and if someone figures out you're faking, they might get annoyed and fix the situation permanently. Still, many choose the dead pawsome method. Lie still, breathe shallowly, and pray nobody steps on your spine. You listen to the chaos swirl around you, steel hitting steel, men crying out, the unmistakable wet splat of something ending poorly nearby. A man drops next to you. He doesn't move. You try not to look. And sometimes it works. You survive by being the battlefield's most committed plank. Eventually, the fight moves on. The noise fades, and you're still breathing. Victory, kind of. The problem is getting back up, because now you're covered in grime and blood. It's unclear whose, and there's the subtle shame of surviving via corpse impersonation. When you do rise, assuming you're not part of a new human pile, you look around, dazed, bent, and smelling like a haunted boot. No one cheers. No one notices. You're just another body that didn't stay down, which by medieval standards makes you one of the lucky ones. The battle is over. You're not quite sure how it ended. There was no dramatic banner raised, no villainous general shouting, retreat as trumpets blared. One moment it was chaos, the next fewer screams, less clanging and more groaning. That's how you know it's done. The noise shifts from aggressive to exhausted. You look around, blinking through blood, hopefully not yours, and sweat. The field is littered with bodies, weapons, and the occasional boot that's somehow separated from its owner and is now resting politely atop a rock. It's quiet, unsettlingly so. Someone mumbles, "We won," with all the enthusiasm of a man who just found out he gets to live, but only in a tent full of disease. Another guy is yelling "victory" while clutching his own arm, which is no longer fully attached. You nod in agreement because technically, yes, you're upright, breathing, and mostly unperforated. That is victory. But the truth is, in medieval warfare, it means not being dead yet. It means dragging your bruised, aching carcass back across the field to the camp, past fallen friends and former enemies, all of whom share the same expression. Really, this is how it ends. There's no celebration, no feast. You might get half a jug of war ale and some bread that's more weapon than food. A priest mutters prayers over the fallen. A few men search corpses for anything useful. One guy finds a decent pair of boots and declares the day a triumph. Your commander, somehow still clean, makes a speech about bravery and honour. You can't hear it. Your ears are still ringing, and your brain is busy focusing on more important things, like not collapsing. You think about the men who didn't make it. Then you think about your foot, which might be broken. Then you think about stew and immediately regret it. But you're alive. Filthy, traumatized, possibly concussed, but alive. Which in medieval terms is what they call a resounding success. You sit down on a rock, exhale, and say the same thing every survivor of every medieval battle has ever whispered under their breath. Never again. Then you get called back for another skirmish next week. After the swords are sheathed and the groaning becomes the dominant battlefield soundtrack, it's time for the least glamorous phase of combat, clean-up. You might assume this means burying the dead and tending to the wounded. And technically that's part of it, but really it's a mix of triage looting and a kind of horrifying medieval arts and crafts project, where the materials are body parts. First, the medics arrive. And by medics, we mean men with knives, bad eyesight, and zero formal training. They specialise in phrases like, "That'll have to come off, so bite on this stick." An experienced surgeon might use wine to clean your wound. A less experienced one might drink it first. You sit down with a sword gash on your thigh, and the vague hope that it's not fatal. The barber surgeon, yes, the guy who normally trims beards, takes one look and says, "We'll see." Then he pulls out a needle that's been sterilised by waving it near a candle. You do your best not to scream. You fail loudly. Meanwhile, bodies are being dragged into haphazard piles. Some are covered, most aren't. You recognise a face or two, but you don't linger. The smell is turning spiritual. Flies arrive en masse, excited for the all-you-can-eat buffet. One lands on your open wound. You swat it. then realise that's probably the cleanest thing you'll experience today. Other soldiers are salvaging equipment, which is a polite word for looting. They rummage through corpses for swords, helmets, shoes, anything not nailed down or still twitching. You don't judge, you do the same. You need new boots, and Gregor doesn't need his anymore. Sorry, Gregor. Some men dig shallow graves, others light peas. One guy just sits quietly with a blank stare and a javelin still sticking out of his arm. You try to offer help. He declines. "It's mine now," he mutters. Wounds are bandaged. Some reopen 5 minutes later. Infection likely. Amputation is probable. Death is optional depending on how lucky you feel and whether the flies take an interest. By nightfall, the battlefield has quieted. The living stumble back to camp covered in mud, blood, and a growing suspicion that the worst is still ahead. And technically, they're right. You've survived. Technically, you've stumbled off the battlefield with all your limbs and just enough brain function to recognise your own boots, which may or may not have belonged to someone else this morning. Now it's time to rest, and by rest we mean collapse somewhere vaguely dry and try not to cry. Back in camp everything smells worse. Somehow the scent of sweat, blood, bad stew and cooked horse lingers in the air like a curse no one's brave enough to name. You find your spot, a patch of earth less swampy than the rest, and lie down with the grace of a dropped sack of onions. Around you, wounded men groan. Some scream. One sings badly. Another one prays to at least 3 different gods just to be safe. A soldier nearby is cleaning his blade with his shirt. He's still wearing it. The cook is ladling out what might be food. You approach and receive something in a bowl that is legally not soup, but emotionally still counts. It has the consistency of regret and the colour of don't ask. You eat it. You have no shame left. That was lost somewhere between the 5th arrow volley and watching a man get slapped to death by a disoriented warhorse. You try to sleep. It doesn't work. You're too sore too, and the guy next to you has started snoring with the intensity of a church organ falling down a hill. You shift positions 12 times and end up slightly wetter than when you started. You stare at the stars and wonder what you did wrong in a past life to deserve this one. Occasionally someone limps in from the darkness, dragging a sword and muttering something about next time. There won't be a next time. There's always a next time. Your commander walks through camp pretending to look concerned. His armour is still polished. He's not bleeding. You hate him a little more. And yet, you're alive. Your body's one massive bruise. Your brain feels like it's been boiled in onion ale, but you made it. This is what passes for downtime in medieval war. Tomorrow the cleanup continues. Or worse, marching. Again, surviving a medieval battle doesn't earn you peace. What it does earn you is a seat round the fire, a lukewarm mug of something vaguely alcoholic, and the right to start rewriting history before your bruises even finish forming. This is how it always ends. Not with a noble ceremony or a bard singing songs of your heroism. No, it ends with a bunch of filthy, traumatized men sitting on damp logs trying to one-up each other with stories that get more questionable by the minute. You listen as a man swears he personally took down 6 knights with nothing but a frying pan. Another claims he caught an arrow mid-air and threw it back. Someone else says he faced off with a war elephant in France, where there are no elephants. You nod, you sip, you lie a little too. In your version, you didn't trip over a corpse and scream. You strategically repositioned, the part where you tried to crawl into a shrub to avoid cavalry. That becomes a stealth maneuver. You skip the moment where you begged a squire to hold your hand during the arrow storm, because everyone here is doing the same thing, turning trauma into legend. It's not about ego, it's survival. If you can laugh about it, maybe it didn't scar you permanently. If you tell the story well enough, maybe it'll drown out the actual memories. The smell of burnt flesh, the look in a dying man's eyes, the sound of metal hitting bone. By now, someone's roasting a questionable piece of meat and no one's asking questions. Laughter bubbles up, dry and slightly desperate. A man plays a lute that's missing 2 strings. The tune is off, but no one cares. A woman, a camp follower, patches a sleeve and hums like the world outside the fire's glow doesn't exist. You stare into the flames and think you lived through it barely, accidentally, miraculously. Soon you'll be on the road again, off to another fight, another glorious encounter. But for now, there's warmth, there's bread, and there's the camaraderie of men who know exactly how much of your story is false, because theirs is too. And for one night at least, that's enough. Centuries before the Great Wall became a continuous monument slicing across northern China, the landscape was a chaotic checkerboard of kingdoms, each with their own ambitions and anxieties. This was the Warring States period, a time of relentless conflict when 7 powerful states clawed and bled for dominance over the Chinese heartland. These kingdoms, constantly at odds with one another, had little reason to cooperate. Instead, they raised individual walls, local makeshift defences built from tamped earth, stones, and timber. These early fortifications were not part of some grand unified plan. They're so desperate measures, the equivalent of drawing a line in the sand and daring your rival to cross it. More than barriers, they were statements of power. This is mine. Try and take it. But it wasn't just rival kingdoms they feared. To the north, beyond the cultivated fields and river valleys, roamed nomadic tribes. The Xiangnu chief among them, skilled horsemen who moved like ghosts across the steppes, raiding and vanishing before retaliation could even be organised. These raids weren't just inconvenient. They were existential threats. Livestock stolen, villages burned, and trade routes severed. The scattered states had little choice but to try and wall off the wild. The earliest of these regional barriers stretched for miles, but they were fragile, hastily constructed with rammed earth or layers of brush and mud. Some were reinforced with wooden stakes or crude stone blocks, but few were built to last. What they lacked in permanence, they made up for in manpower. Tens of thousands of peasants, conscripts and prisoners were thrown into the grueling work, often with no choice and no rest. These isolated walls were often poorly maintained, crumbling in the face of time and weather. Still, they represented the beginning of an idea that China's northern frontier could be tamed, not through negotiation or diplomacy, but through sheer will and wall building. No single king envisioned the Great Wall as we know it today. That dream of unification, of a singular barrier stretching across the spine of China, would come later with the rise of an emperor who craved not just power, but eternity in stone. And so, amid dust and blood, the groundwork was laid, not for a wall, but for a legend. In 221 BCE, after centuries of chaos, a single man did what no one before him had: unite all of China. His name was Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of the Qin dynasty. And he didn't just want to rule, he wanted to redefine the landscape itself. Where others saw a fractured region stitched together by war, he saw the beginnings of an empire, and to protect it, he needed something colossal. One of his first decrees as emperor was to link and expand the existing regional walls built during the Warring States period. These individual barriers, some already decaying, others barely more than glorified trenches, would be joined into a single massive defence network to keep the nomadic Xiongnu and other northern tribes at bay. But this was no repair job. It was an engineering campaign of imperial scale. Qin's vision was not just about military defence, it was about power, unity, and control. A continuous wall symbolised not just the edge of civilization, but the edge of his personal authority. To build it, he conscripted hundreds of thousands of soldiers, peasants, prisoners, and scholars who had run afoul of the regime. Many were worked to death in remote mountain passes or scorching deserts. The wall earned a grim nickname among the people, the longest cemetery on Earth. And yet the sheer scale of the project was unlike anything the world had seen. The materials were brutal and basic, rammed earth-packed layer by layer between wooden frames. Workers stomped it down with their feet or pounded it using logs. Where stone was available, it was hauled by brute strength. Tools were primitive. The terrain was merciless. But Qinshan was relentless. He didn't just build a wall, he built roads, standardized weights and measures, and even unified the written script. In his mind, all of it, the roads, the rules, the walls, was part of one project to create order from chaos and leave behind an empire that would last forever. The original China Wall may not have looked like the iconic stone structures we picture today, but it was the foundation. It was the beginning of a boundary that would rise, fall, and rise again through dynasty after dynasty. And next it would pass into the hands of the Han. After the death of Qin Shi Huang and the swift collapse of the Qin dynasty, many of his sweeping reforms were rolled back. But not the wall. The Han dynasty, 206 BCE. 220 CE, which rose in the Qin's wake, recognized the same eternal truth. China's northern border was never truly secure, and so rather than abandon the project, the Han emperors doubled down, expanding, strengthening, and redefining the Great Wall. Under Emperor Wu of Han in particular, the wall wasn't just a military barrier. It became the backbone of imperial strategy. The Han launched massive campaigns to push back the Zhongnu, those same nomadic horsemen who had terrorized the north for generations. In doing so, they extended the wall farther than ever before into regions that would eventually serve as arteries of trade and movement for centuries. The Han didn't just rebuild the Qin walls, they adapted them. Instead of relying solely on rammed earth, they incorporated bricks, stones, and more sophisticated fortifications where the terrain allowed. Watchtowers were added at intervals, allowing soldiers to spot raiding parties from afar and light signal fires, an early warning system that let news of an attack travel hundreds of miles in a matter of hours. More than a military tool, the Han Wall became a logistical network. Garrison posts, signal towers, and supply depots turned the wall into a functional military road. Troops could move quickly, supplies could be relayed efficiently, and messages could travel with blazing speed by beacon or runner. The Great Wall had become more than a line. It was now a living system of defence. Life along the Han Wall was harsh but not forgotten. The Empire stationed thousands of soldiers and settlers in remote forts, creating a frontier society where families, merchants, and outposts clung to imperial protection. Over time, these lonely stations became small communities, and in their shadows, cultures met. Han Chinese and nomadic tribes traded, mingled, and occasionally clashed in these dusty crossroads. By the end of the Han era, the wall had transformed into something new. Not just a line of defence, but a symbol of imperial presence in the vast northern reaches, and yet, even the mighty Han couldn't hold the line forever. Next came chaos, collapse, and eventually a new dynasty, with a bold new style of wall building. With the fall of the Han dynasty in 220 CE, China once again unravelled into political disunity and warlordism. What had been a powerful, centralised empire splintered into rival kingdoms during the Three Kingdoms period, followed by centuries of instability. And as the emperors fell, so too did the priority of the Great Wall. Many stretches of the Han and Qin walls crumbled into dust. Neglect, erosion, and looting took their toll. Station outposts were abandoned, watchtowers collapsed,